Hello and thank you for watching. We always hear about people, missionaries always say, Jesus fulfilled all the prophecies in the Old Testament, and the Jews always say Jesus didn't fulfill any prophecies. So that tells me that both Jews and Christians are using the word prophecy, and they have different meanings, different definitions. So let's get to the bottom of this. Old Christians are taught to read English translations, of course, and they're told to start with like the Gospel of Matthew or John, and then kind of go back and look for things in the Old Testament that comport, that confirm the things that Jesus said. Let me give you some examples here. You always see these passages in the New Testament, the verses that tell you what Jesus said, this or that. And at the end it says, this was done to fulfill what the prophet said in Isaiah or Jeremiah. For example, when you read the Gospel according to Matthew, which is the first book in the New Testament, the first version of the Jesus story, in chapter 27, after he was betrayed by Judas, Judas feels guilty and he returns the 30 pieces of silver that he was paid to betray Jesus. And then he hangs himself, according to chapter 27, verse 5. And it says the high priest used the money to buy a potter's field for a burial ground for foreigners. Now, here's where the prophecy comes in. Author of Matthew's Gospel says in verse 9, in chapter 27, it says, what was spoken of in Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took 30 pieces of silver for the potter's field as the Lord commanded. And there's a little asterisk next to it and it tells you to go back to the Old Testament and look for Jeremiah chapter 19. So when you go back to the Old Testament in the book of Jeremiah chapter 19, when you get to verse 11, it says, you are to proclaim to them that this was what the Lord of hosts says. I will shatter the nation and the city like one shatters a potter's jar that can never be again repaired. They will bury the dead in Topheth until there is no room to bury them. So the story in Jeremiah is talking about making a burial ground, and because they're talking about buying a burial ground in Matthew, that's a prophecy fulfilled. I don't get it. Let's look at some more evidence. Let's look at John's Gospel in the New Testament, chapter 19, as they're about to crucify Jesus. The soldiers are dividing his garments and they cast lots to see who gets them. This was done to fulfill the scripture. The little asterisk next to it says to go back to Psalm 22 in the Old Testament, verse 18. And when you turn it back, sure enough, you open it up, it says, they divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. Now, if you're like me, you're going, so the author of John, just like Matthew, they've got a copy of the Old Testament in front of them as they're writing the New Testament. And they're taking these little mundane, ordinary things that can happen to anybody or that anybody can do, and they're saying, Jesus said this too, or this happened to Jesus too, therefore it's a prophecy fulfilled. Do you see what I'm getting at? This is what Christians say is prophecy. And here's another good example. John chapter 19, verse 28 says after this, knowing everything had been accomplished, and to fulfill the scripture, Jesus said, I am thirsty. Huh? How is being thirsty fulfilling a scripture? Well, of course, you go back in the Old Testament and there's going to be a part in there where somebody's thirsty. Okay? So Jesus being thirsty when he's dying is supposedly fulfilling Psalm 22, verse 15, which says, my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Now, this is a Psalm of David, unless you're Joe Biden and you think it's a poem by a palmist. But anyway, it's supposedly fulfilling, it's supposed to be predicting Jesus being thirsty on the cross. That's what a prophecy is to Christians. Are you starting to get the gist of this now? Well, what about the Jewish version of prophecy? I'm going to tell you what the definition of prophecy is according to Jews in just a second here. But I want to give you one more example also from the Gospel of John chapter 19, when the soldiers come to take Jesus off the cross because he can't leave the bodies up overnight. They're supposed to break the bones of the person on the cross, that way they'll die faster. But anyway, Jesus is already dead when they get there, so they don't have to break his bones. And they also pierce his side with a sword or a spear, and water and blood comes out, and that's supposed to be symbolic of living water. We're not going to get into that. But this was done to fulfill the Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, which says, "They will look on me, the one whom they have pierced." Now, if you ask anybody that comes to your door like a missionary, well, what is Zechariah chapter 12 about? Is it just a grab bag, something for you to go back and take a one-liner out and say, hey, look, Jesus was thirsty. It's talking about Jesus. He fulfilled a prophecy. Hey, this guy stubbed his toe. We'll write Jesus stubbed his toe in the New Testament, and so the prophecy can be fulfilled. Now, real quickly here, before we get on to the Jewish definition of what a prophecy is, in John 19, verse 36, it says, not one of his bones will be broken. That's the prophecy supposedly going all the way back to Exodus and the Passover meal, where God gives the Israelites rules about how to cook the meal, how to eat it, and the flesh of the meal shall not be eaten out of the house, outside the home, and none of the bones of the Passover meal will be broken. So to Christians, the idea that you're not supposed to break the bone of the Passover meal is a prediction 2,000 years later of Jesus not getting his bones broke on the cross. Okay, so I've kept you waiting long enough. Now I'm going to tell you what the Jewish perspective of a prophecy is. And don't take my word for it. Verify this on your own if you don't believe me or if you think I'm wrong. According to Judaism, or to a rabbi that I heard this from, a prophecy is when God gives a message to the prophet, Isaiah, for example, and then Isaiah is supposed to share this message with the people. Now, if it's a good prophecy, it's something that will come to pass. If it's a bad prophecy, it's something that can be avoided by a change in one's behavior. Now, all over in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, you're going to see it described what the Messiah will be. He will come from the line of David through his son Solomon, and it tells us what the world will be like in Messianic times. For example, there will be world peace. There will be an ingathering of Jews and back to Israel, and Israel will dwell in safety. And the temple will be rebuilt, among a whole lot of other things. Now, when you look out the window, do you see world peace? No. Neither do the Jews. Do you see the temple rebuilt? No. Do you see an ingathering of Jews? No, of course not. None of these messianic prophecies have happened yet. So how could Jesus be the Messiah? And the answer to that, the Christian's answer is that, well, he'll do that when he comes back the second time. And the Jews look at you and say, second time? Where in the Old Testament does it say that the Messiah will come, he will do nothing, and he will be murdered, but then he will come back a second time and fulfill all the prophecies that, if they were to happen, would be verifiable just by looking out the window? So they come up with the second coming theory, and all kinds of other weird little terms like progressive revelations, dual prophecies, which means it could happen to David and it also happened to Jesus. But again, there's a difference between Jewish definition of prophecy in that if the prophecies that are in the Old Testament came to pass, they'd be verifiable. All these things like somebody stubbing their toe or not getting their bones broken or being thirsty, those aren't prophecies. That's child's play. Anybody can write a story and have another book in front of them and take something that happened to that person and write it in their story and say, oh, it's a prophecy. So we're going to talk more about this in depth in another video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you learned something, and I hope I didn't offend anybody. Talk to you later.